So, the problem with separation anxiety, there are so many different variations that one size does not fit all. If you have struggled with separation anxiety with your dog, you are likely to have Googled it, and the internet will tell you that you should try using a crate, you should increase the number of toys that you give to your dog, and you should just start increasing the amount of time so they get used to it. But actually, that kind of advice works for very few types of separation anxiety. Actually, I've identified around sort of 9 types, 9 main ones, and that kind of advice would make a few of them much worse. Some dogs have problems settling, so giving them more toys is just going to make that worse. Some dogs have problems with frustration, so putting them in a crate is going to make that worse because that's just another barrier. And I mean, I've seen dogs eat their way out of a crate and actually physically hurt themselves because this barrier is so important to them. Taking the barrier away suddenly helps with the problem. And I've got quite a few cases of separation anxiety that I'm working on with people at the moment. But the reason why I wanted to talk about this is because 3 of them resonate particularly. They all have basically the same kind of symptom. They're all presenting in the same way. All 3 dogs, they're howling and crying, but they're not showing any kind of destructive behaviour. There's no toilet behaviour. So there's lots of things that are missing from this separation anxiety. But on the surface of it, if you were to just read a description of what they're doing, you would think all these 3 dogs were exactly the same, but they're really not. They're all very different. Each one of these dogs has got its own training plan, all very different from the others. All these problems are caused by different things. They all have underlying issues which are different. So they have all needed their own different approach. And this is the problem, I think, with internet advice, because all 3 of those dogs had tried the basic standard advice that you can get on the internet, you know, the standard crates and toys and extending the time, but it hasn't worked for any one of these 3 dogs. So all of these have required much more time in terms of trying to assess the problem and figure out where it came from and what the problem behaviour is trying to achieve. Because whilst it is just exactly the same behaviour, it's howling and crying, in each case the dog has different expectations of what's going to happen as a result of that behaviour. So they've all got different underlying problems, they've all got different goals, but the problem is the same, and the temptation might be to try and give them all the same kind of training plan, but as we can see, that's not worked. Now they have their own different training plans, they're all starting to make progress, and they're all on their way. I guess the other problem with separation anxiety is the amount of time that it can take, because every dog is so different. As we can see, every case is different, every cause is different, every goal is different, and every dog is different, and the way that they respond to things is different. A dog that is struggling with communication might come around very quickly. Once we get that communication right and we are able to tell them that they're going to be safe, we could do that by creating a little routine before they leave, which leads always to a safe response. So that could actually have quite a quick turnaround, whereas a dog that has repeated a behaviour over and over again, maybe a dog that's trying to seek attention through barking, that might take much longer, because that problem is likely to be seen in other areas of the dog's life as well. So we have to work on that as well as building up time. Maybe in another case, the dog does actually have anxiety, and we need to teach them how to be safe and how to settle by themselves, because very many dogs with separation anxiety, if they don't know how to actually settle themselves, will never get past this problem. So we need to teach them how to find a place of comfort and how to settle themselves in it, and how to get themselves off into a nice kind of calm state. If they can't do that, then once we've left them, the amount of time we can leave them is only going to be very limited, because it won't be very long before something disturbs them. Maybe the postman or the next door neighbour might walk past. So this is a really crucial skill. So working with separation anxiety also involves teaching dogs how to settle themselves. It does involve building up time. It involves really understanding where their boundary is at that point before they start to go into a panic state, because this is what happens with separation anxiety. This is linked to the panic emotion, and that's where this ends up. So as the worse your dog's anxiety gets as you start to leave, the closer they get to a panic. So we can't let them go into a panic state, because once they've gone into that, there's nothing we can do to help them apart from give them the time and patience and let them come back down again. But if you're working on separation anxiety, the likelihood is that you won't be in the house to do that. And this is how this problem can get worse and worse and worse. So we need to be able to work within their boundaries, within their comfort zone, to make sure that we never push them into that panic emotion. And the only way to do that is to be patient and to take time. But adding extra toys will just make things worse for dogs that don't know how to settle. And that would be something we would look at in the whole dog's day, as well as whenever we're leaving them. For some dogs though, giving them something to chew on, something to safe to chew on, obviously, something to lick at, something to do, can help get them over the leaving part, because some dogs are fine when they're on their own. It's just they don't like being left. So that minute that it takes between you deciding to leave and being out the house and gone, that's the bit that we need to focus on. Once they've actually got past that and settled, then they're fine. So sometimes we just need to teach them that that bit where you're leaving is okay, that they will be safe. And once you've got them past that, then they're going to be just fine, because they already know how to settle themselves, and they'll just go and lie down. And once you've got a dog that can settle themselves, you can leave them for much, much longer periods of time, because it won't matter if they get disturbed. They'll be able to just resettle and go back to what they were doing, and just waiting patiently and calmly and just enjoying some me time. Some dogs cope very well in different environments. So some dogs have separation anxiety in the house, but actually can cope really well by being left in the car, or being left at the office, or being left in other places. So there's so many different varieties and different ways. Some dogs have separation anxiety that is brought on by frustration that has happened earlier in the day. So perhaps this frustration is built up and built up and built up, and at the point in which they get left by themselves, they finally feel they're able to relax and just let all of that anxiety and frustration flow out, and that will then again look like a destructive behaviour. It's important to note as well about the toilet aspect of separation anxiety, because this is connected to general anxiety. So when a dog goes into anxiety, into panic, into fight or flight mode, their bladder and bowel are very much affected by that. The body prioritizes different areas and different functions whenever it's in fight or flight mode. So the bowel and bladder are affected. So if you've come home and you find that there's been a mess, it's most likely happened quite early on. And it is certainly not your dog protesting or being upset with you or trying to send you a message or any of those things. They weren't being naughty. It was just a completely involuntary response to being in a state of panic and anxiety. So if that has happened, then know that this was not something that your dog has done maliciously or, because of poor training. They didn't have any option to do it. So actually then, once we start to work on separation anxiety, these are the kind of things that I start to look at. These normal doggy behaviours that happen when dogs are relaxed and not in fight or flight mode. So you always know that you're winning when you can see your dog doing normal relaxed things like seeking out treats, because reward seeking and food eating is also something that gets switched off when a dog becomes into fight or flight mode, when they go into that panic anxiety state. So we know that they're not feeling anxiety if they are going for treats, if they're looking for treats, if their body language is nice and soft, because we know that when they go into anxiety, into fight or flight mode, everything tenses up. So if their body is soft and it's quite relaxed, then we also know that the behaviour is now not related to anxiety. I would look at that kind of toilet behaviour, because again, that's an involuntary response to being in that state. So when that stops happening, then I also know that separation anxiety, that anxiety part, is now starting to disappear, that what we're working on now is now a habit. And this happens also again with separation anxiety, that once you start to fix the anxiety, the problem can change. So it becomes then we're working on learned responses and habits, things that have been developed and learned over the period of time when your dog had an anxiety. And that's when you get into that stage, it's a real turning point for families, because up until then, what they've had is a dog that's been extremely anxious and extremely sad, and that's really difficult to cope with. It's really difficult to live with, because you don't want your dog to feel like that. That's not what you were wanting. You want your dog to be confident and relaxed and happy in his home, and often people don't really want too much. Most people would be happy just to be able to nip out for coffee or go and do their groceries, without knowing that their dog was getting really upset and sad and anxious because of it. So this is a huge turning point in training. It means that we're winning, we're on the right track, and as long as we can manage the behaviour now and undo those habits and undo that learned behaviour, then we know that we're winning. So hopefully that's been helpful. If you're working with separation anxiety, this is not a quick fix. The problem may change, as you can see. It may start with anxiety and it may change into something else. The important thing though is to know where the anxiety has come from, where that separation problem has come from, and to work on that whilst you're doing those other things. But if you are in any doubt or whatever, then get the help of a trained behaviourist, because the internet has one solution, whereas an experienced and qualified behaviourist will have lots and lots of solutions. They'll know where to look, they'll know how to assess this problem, they'll know what things to look out for, what questions to ask, and they'll be able to give you much better advice about how to solve this problem. So hopefully that has helped you with your dog and your dog's separation anxiety. I'll speak to you again soon. Take care. Bye bye.